I am so excited to welcome famed cult hit director Vincenzo Natali to the podcast today. Welcome from the spaceship from the film Alien, I hear.
Yes, there's a xenomorph on board.
I love it. It must have taken you a while to get there.
I had one in the backyard.
Lovely. It's good to have these things just hanging around.
Totally.
Totally. So I'm so thankful that you're able to join us. We're really excited to talk to some of the great minds in Canadian film, ranging from directors like yourself to actresses, actors, art directors. That's you too. And that's actually where I wanted to start, because you have had such a long history in the industry. And I think many people probably think of you only as a director, of which you are very critically acclaimed, but you were in the industry long before you were directing, and that was as a art director.
Well, not an art director, but I was a storyboard artist.
Right.
So
pardon me.
If you look at, no, not at all, but if you look at my IMDb, for whatever reason, the first thing that'll pop up will be my art department credits. Mm-hmm. So you might have seen that's it. But what I really, I started making films when I was a kid. And in those days, we used this thing called Super 8 film. But so I had, really when I want the deep history, what I first wanted to be was a makeup effects artist. So I did a lot of terrible things to myself and my friends in an attempt to, make monsters. And then I was also interested in visual effects. I was very much a child of Rick Baker and Ray Harryhausen, people like that. So when I first started making films, they were really just a means to play with those things.
Okay. But
then eventually my interest in the filmmaking took over, eclipsed it. And all this is to say that really I've been making films since I was a kid. And then as a means to support myself, I ended up doing storyboards. Mm-hmm. But I was always, in my mind, I was always a filmmaker.
Right. Well, and that proved, kind of like manifested itself, because you took that skill as a storyboard artist and you've translated that into your directing approach. Like, that gives you a really strong background into transitioning into directing, I would imagine, because you already had a way of envisioning how to take the story from your mind or the page onto the screen.
Before wanting to be all those things that I mentioned, I was also very interested in comic books. As a kid, that was really my first love. And it was sort of post Star Wars, Raiders of the Lost Ark, that movies took over. But when I did make my little movies, I would storyboard them.
Right.
Even when I was doing Super 8 films. And I made these films with friends, and we were quite serious about them. So in the later years, we would make a movie every summer, and it would be extensively storyboarded and planned and all those things. And so, but as a consequence, I always liked to draw. That was always my thing, my contribution. And then later, after I left film school, I was, for a very brief period, a terrible waiter. And then luckily managed to get a gig at Nelvana, which is an animation studio here in Toronto, and doing storyboards, actually starting as an assistant. And then I had no formal art training, so it was a little bit like art school for me. And they were great. And that I was there for 5 years, and that was a kind of film school. So in line with what you were saying, I had the good fortune to storyboard, but at the same time work with really talented directors. And then storyboarding for animation is a form of directing, because you are the first person to envision the script. They'll give you the script, and then what they would do actually with a half-hour, this is a Saturday morning TV that I'd work on, with a half-hour episode, they would split it into 2 acts. And so each storyboard artist would take an act, would split it between two artists. But effectively, they were giving you the script, and then you had to draw the shots. So you were blocking it, you were editing it, because animation is pre-edited. You were doing all the things that a director would do, minus working with the actors. But this was done under the auspices of the director of the episode. So you would show your work to them, and then they would comment on it, and you would get really great feedback. And I really learned, I think, a lot of the basic tenets of classic filmmaking, visual storytelling. So it was a great training ground for me. And then I also did some live action work as well. So there was also the process of working with different directors and seeing how they approach things differently, which I think was, quite educational. So yeah, I was very lucky. It was a great way in. And then I was able to make enough money doing that I could actually finance my own little 16mm films. So it was I kind of fell into the right spot.
Yeah. And then your first film, your first feature film, I guess, because you made many films clearly before that, with a long history. I mean, there are few Canadian filmmakers who could say they made a film every year. So your childhood was really rich indeed.
Well, they were necessarily good movies.
That's all. That's subjective, though, isn't it?
I wish I made a film every year now.
That's what I'm saying. Like that's really just a luxury. Yeah, but let's talk about your breakout hit, so to speak, Cube, which is still such a cult phenomenon. That film, and many of your films, seem to be focused on very limited environments. And I find it interesting to talk to you as we're both doing this from our homes in very limited environments.
Right.
And whether... Well, first of all, we'll talk about Cube, of course, but just wondering how this time in self-isolation has impacted your thoughts on the kind of films you do, because it's sort of like you were made, or your storytelling was made for this type of environment, and now that you're living it,
right.
does that change things for you at all? Does it make you reassess some of the projects you've done, or how you might have changed certain things, dynamics?
No, to be honest, not really, because Cube, for example, was a movie that I wrote with a lifelong friend of mine, Andre Bajelic, who I made films with when I was a kid. And we were roommates at the time, in our 20s, and kind of destitute and feeling claustrophobic and trapped in our little apartment. So, and if you do this for a living, anyone who does it for a living, realize that very quickly, but most of your time is spent being alone in a room anyway, writing or trying to convince people to allow you to make your movie. So it is in many respects a solitary, confined life.
Right.
And I haven't found this situation we're in to be all that dramatically different in terms of my daily experience. Mm-hmm. It's just nice because the phone doesn't ring as much, and actually, to be honest, I kind of enjoy it. So it hasn't changed my feelings about what I've done before or how I approach films. The only thing that it has changed is the thought that probably everybody's going to make, not everybody, a lot of people are going to make claustrophobic confinement stories in the near future. Partly because those will be the easiest things to get made, because no one really knows how it's going to work. We're probably going to gradually work our way up to making movies the way we used to, but it's going to be hard to do that. And probably the first films that will get made will be made with very small crews and small groups of people. So by necessity, they're probably going to be confined. Yeah. And so I desperately don't want to do that. Right. Knowing that there's going to be a flood of these things, I don't really want to be a part of that. So I'm trying to branch out. But really, the reason there's probably many reasons why I made those movies. But the number one was simply budget. Mm-hmm. I wanted to do bigger things, but I knew certainly when I was starting that the only kind of film I would be able to make would be something probably with my own money. Mm-hmm. And Cube is a movie that was conceived entirely out of the necessity to shoot a feature-length story on one set, but with the bonus of one set being able to double for many. So kind of cheating a bit so that I could have characters who are confined, but they wouldn't be confined to one room. They could actually move from room to room. But because the set, all the rooms are identical, I could reuse the same set. So I would amortize my art production budget. And then, of course, you see, once I did that and it had some small degree of success, I got pigeonholed. And I leaned into
by the industry.
A little bit, or well, I wouldn't say, I'm being harsh, but what I think what happens is when you do these things, if you have a success, you realize it's easier to approach people with something that they know you can do, or that has some relationship with what you've done. Plus, it was generally of interest to me. Like, there are artistic reasons why I like telling those stories. It's not just a budget. So I've done a variety of them. Having said that, I'm really not inclined to do a one location story again anytime soon.
Fact, mirror,
I would like to expand the palette.
Fact.
What's that?
I was just saying fact mirroring fiction or vice versa nowadays, right? Yeah.
Exactly.
Well, and you just came off.
Yeah.
You just came off a film similar of that nature, which was In the Tall Grass. Not necessarily just one set, but kind of restricted to one location, except this is completely different from your Cube days. You've got a much bigger budget. It's a Netflix production. You've got some great name cast. How was that approach different? And you've talked a lot in interviews about, the need for your films being the way they are, shooting in one location because of budget, and whether or not having millions and millions of extra dollars is a good or a bad thing. But In the Tall Grass, you didn't have a $300 million budget, but you definitely had a much healthier budget. How did that impact what you were able to achieve with that film that you probably couldn't have achieved with something like Cube when you were really limited?
Like, where I think the way to look at these, what's that?
Where do you take those liberties? Like, where do you think the money is well spent, is I guess my question.
Well, it's an apples and oranges thing. Even two movies like that have some similar DNA. Really what it comes down to is a ratio. The ratio of your resources to what you're trying to put on the screen. And in my experience, by and large, has been that even if my budgets increase, my ambition increases in kind. So the ratio remains the same.
Interesting.
Cube was really stretched because that film should have had more money. Even a little bit would have made a big difference. I think we shot that in 21 days, whereas, In the Tall Grass was a low budget Netflix film. It was not a large budget by their standards. We were with the low budget division, and we had 35 days to shoot that. The longest I've ever had to shoot a film was I did a movie called Splice that had, I think, 42 days. So it's not, it's always about time management. To me, the craft of directing, maybe you could say the art of directing, has a lot to do with time management. Because if you had unlimited time to direct a scene, probably most people could do a decent job. The trick is to do
Scorsese approach.
Well, or Stanley Kubrick, shot The Shining, which is a few characters in one location for over 300 days, I think. He also happened to be brilliant. But yeah, I'm jealous of, I go, well, sure. Give me 300 days.
Right.
Actually, I think that could almost be a problem. But that really, I think that is a big part of directing is how to maximize your resources within the limited time frame you have. It's always a battle against time. And I'm sure if I had $100 million, there's never enough money, because it's never perfect. And you can always push things further and further. And so I guess to other filmmakers, maybe younger filmmakers who are starting out, what I would say is the boat that you're in, making your small film, whether it's a short film or a feature, isn't radically different than the boat I'm in, or radically different than the boat Steven Spielberg is in, because the basic tools of storytelling remain the same, and the aspirations of James Cameron are that, for instance, are that much greater. Right. Like, he still has to, I promise you, he still struggles. He firstly struggles with himself, and then he struggles with the limitations of time, money, and reality. So in a way that's comforting, because you go, well, you know, it's not like somebody else has it so much better than I do. It's always going to be challenging, and the same challenges will arise for everybody to a greater or lesser extent. So when I did In the Tall Grass, it was the same thing. You know, it's a scramble and a race, and we were very lucky. But you know, had our luck kind of gone sideways a little bit, it could have been a catastrophe. Like, it's always on the edge. It always feels like you're sort of on the edge of disaster. The one thing I will say about working with Netflix, contrary to most of my filmmaking experiences, which have been independent, is that when we finished the movie, they liked it and they were willing to give us a little more money to add some visual effects and to, you know, sweeten some things. So in an independent film, regardless of what the budget is, it's a fixed amount of money. There's just based on how the financing structure works. There's no studio, there's no sugar daddy to go to say, hey, I really need a little more money, because it's all been fixed before you started shooting. So it was great. I literally like Netflix, and it was great to have a studio that you could say, you know, $500,000 would really help us to make this the best movie it can be. That was special. That's not the situation.
Well, yeah, I mean, there's a lot of Canadian films that are made on $500,000 still. So it's nice just to add some sweetening, as you say. When you're talking about that time management, again, I would go back to your history as a storyboard artist, and that must make things easier to manage because you've already got it planned out. Do you think that a lot of, I feel like the art of storyboarding might sort of be falling by the wayside to some degree, and I wonder if that's true and whether you see that in new filmmakers.
I don't know because I haven't hung out on a lot of new filmmaker sets. I don't think storyboards are for everybody. I mean, you know, one of my favorite filmmakers, David Cronenberg, hates them, like despises them, thinks they're the death of filmmaking. So everyone has their own way. For me, it's almost like a security blanket. Like, I can't show up on set unless I have a storyboard. It just gives me this sort of level of comfort. And because I can do them myself, and I'm relatively fast at doing them, it's easy for me. Like, just, you know, if I had to translate everything through an artist, that would be, which I have done before on occasion, and it's a little bit frustrating for me because because there's just like one barrier between you and the page.
Sure.
So I'm lucky that way. Having said that, I feel like really anyone can do storyboards, because storyboards are not about the quality of the art, it's about the information that is contained within. And where they are beneficial, I mean, they're beneficial in a number of ways for me personally, because it permits me to think about the movie in great detail. It forces me actually to think about the movie in great detail. Or to give you an example of TV, I do a lot of TV work now, which I don't write. My movies I generally write or have a hand in the writing of, and so I'm very intimately connected to what's on the page. But with TV, I'm just handed a script, and then 2 weeks later I'm shooting it. So if I have to draw it, it forces me to examine the script in a kind of detail, a forensic detail that I would never do if I were just reading it, I think. Mm-hmm. But I actually have to break it down into blocking and shots and so on. And then also, whether it's an independent film schedule or a TV schedule, or maybe even a feature, studio features schedule, you're just always bound by time limitations. And if I have the board there, I know what generally happens at some point is, and usually towards the end of the day, is you're running out of time.
Right. Always running out of time and money.
Always. So you have to get X number of things done in X number of hours. And I don't think if I had that menu of items in front of me, I could do that efficiently. But when I've broken down all the beats that are important to me within the scene, even if I don't strictly follow the shots, even if I change the blocking or the shot plan, I still, at a glance, can see what are the important things that I have to get in order to survive my day. And so that's, for me, invaluable. Like, that's why, it's an invaluable tool. Also, it permits other people to see what you're doing. Like, it's a great form of communication on the set. There's even a psychological element to it, because when you show up at the beginning of the day with a plan and people can see it, that makes the crew feel confident that somebody knows where they're going. Could be mistakenly, but it looks like something's been planned. So, and then the way I do it is when we shoot a shot, we circle it and we cross it off. So you can also feel the progress through the day. And so I find it's beneficial that way. But for me, it's like it's one of my favorite parts of the process, because it's where I get to be truly creative, and I'm not inhibited by any physical limitations of reality. It's only my mind that is, limitations of my mind that I have to deal with when I'm storyboarding. Last thing I'll say about it, this is an incredibly long answer, is I think the art of storyboarding is, half of it is like how to get your ideas on the page. The other half is how to integrate your ideas with the reality that you encounter on the set.
Do you mean the reality of the actors or of the set, like the visuals and the environment, or both?
Everything.
Right.
Now, in a perfect world, I try not to do my boards until I've seen the set or the location. It's hard to, so much is defined by the space that you're in, that unless you're in a very generic kind of environment, it's hard to plan the scene. Or unless you're like building everything from the storyboard up, you have the luxury to like design the set.
Well, and that's what, not to interject, but that's what actually I was wondering as you were talking about the process of the storyboards is, do you know what the set looks like already? And do you get to inform that partly with your storyboards, or do you, so I guess that's what you're talking about. So you like to visit the set, and then
you need to know what the space, whether the space physically exists or not, you need to know what kind of space you're in order to block a scene. There's no way to block a scene without knowing what kind of space you're in. You might not know the exact dimensions of it, but you have to have some concept of what it is going to be. So if I can, I try to wait on shot listing or storyboarding until I know what kind of environment I'm in. And then I completely lost my train of thought. What was your question?
Sorry, I interrupted you there.
Not at all. Not at all. Anyway, the second half of the process is when you show up on set, you have a plan, but invariably things are going to come up that are going to alter that plan. Either things that inspire you to extrapolate or build on your plan, or things that are in opposition to your plan that you have to work around. So that's the second part, is like being able to be zen enough, to be flexible enough, to have a very clear vision, at the same time alter that vision to incorporate what is in front of you. And usually, well, I wouldn't say usually, often I find that there are discoveries to be made with the actors, with whatever presents itself on the day, that enhance the original plan, that actually make it better. Like that's part of the art of directing, is to be connected with the world and be present in the world that you're walking into, and without disrupting your vision of what you're trying to do. It's the integration of those two things. That's what's sort of taken a long time for me to, I don't know if I've even fully learned how to do that.
Yeah. No, I'm glad you mentioned that, because that was the other part of storyboarding that I was going to ask, was whether you stray from that a lot or not so much, but what you're saying is that you have the flexibility of kind of adapting things based on the environment you get into, running out of time and money, and the interaction with the actors that you're working with.
Yeah, you really you need to do that, because often the best things just kind of fall out of the sky. And I draw my storyboards for them to be disposable. Like my storyboards aren't particularly great works of art. I do them as fast as I can, and I try not to obsess over what they look like, and just more interested in what the idea behind them, because I don't want to become emotionally attached to a drawing. Like, nobody's going to be watching the drawing when they see the movie. So yeah, I see them as they're a step to an end point, but they're not the end point unto themselves.
This might be a stupid question, but do you draw them in black and white or in color? Like, do you think of lighting and color as you're doing those, or is that completely sort of separate?
No, unless there's something very particular about the light. Like, no, I think more compositionally. I think, I gravitate towards very graphic compositions. Like, I like a certain amount of formalism in my blocking and my, staging of scenes. Like, I'm not a Paul Greengrass kind of guy. Like, I don't walk in with 3 cameras handheld and just capture stuff. Not that there's anything wrong with that, but that's not my go-to approach.
Now, you did mention that you've been doing a lot of episodic TV, and one of the shows that I wanted to talk to you about was Westworld, partly because I'm a huge fan, but also there was one of the episodes that you directed, Reunion, which both Evan Rachel Wood and Jimmy Simpson sort of selected as their submitted episodes to be for their Emmy nominations, which leads me to think you have a really good way with actors. So what is your approach to working with actors? A lot of directors, they like to let the actors do what they're doing and just sort of tweak here and there. Do you do a lot of rehearsals? And I don't know if you even have that opportunity on a episodic set, but there must have been some sort of magic you created that episode was selected by both those actors. So what is your magic approach to working with thespians?
It could well be just that those are really well written episodes. Yeah. Their characters get to do interesting things. But my approach with actors is to be very open to their contribution, but to also have a clear idea of what I'm wanting. So, and I've generally found, every actor is different, but I've generally found that actors respond to me best when I have some notion of what the scene is supposed to be. So I'll suggest a blocking. I see you're sitting on the couch, you're walking over here by the window. Like, I have an idea of what it's going to be. But if they object to it, I really listen to them. And I find more often than not, I ultimately will agree with the actor. Like, they have an intuition about their character and what they're comfortable doing that is, generally speaking, well worth listening to. That's something I've learned over time, by the way. I wasn't always of that mind, but I've come to that place. And, sometimes an actor, if anything, sometimes actors will have a tendency to not see the bigger picture. Like, they're looking through the lens of their character. So they might want to do something that disrupts the storytelling, the larger narrative that is being told. And that's maybe sometimes where I differ with actors, but usually I find that they are very aware of how they fit into the greater whole, and they just have that's why they're, if they're good actors, that's why they're good actors. So they have an intuitive sense about what's right. So I really listen to that. And then I like to rehearse because in most cases, just because, again, it saves time on the set. And then I find it, I don't like creating things in a pressure cooker. I don't think, sometimes brilliant ideas come out of a pressure situation, but usually if you're fearful, you tend to be less creative or less open-minded. So what's nice about a rehearsal is that you don't have 40 people or whatever, how many people are standing around waiting for you to finish your blocking or rehearsal to get started. You don't have the weight of the pressure of the day. So you can just quietly talk about things, and you can experiment with things. And then sometimes if it seems very complicated with a lot of characters, it's just a massive time saver. Like you could easily spend an hour blocking a scene with 8 characters. You could spend half a day blocking a scene with 8 characters. So, which would be death on virtually anything I work on. That's not how I can function on a film set. So I like rehearsal. I've never had a situation, I've heard of filmmakers who have, like William Friedkin, when he made The Exorcist, said he rehearsed it to the point where he killed it. And so when it came time to shoot the film, he threw out all of his blocking and all of everything they did in rehearsal. He just threw it all out. So I've never had that situation. I've never rehearsed a scene to the point where I thought, oh, that really took the life out of it. So yeah, I like it. One thing I also say is I don't shoot a lot of takes either. Like while I like to be prepared and have a plan and rehearse, I find with most actors by take 6, they're kind of done. Not always, but I've never understood, except for maybe technical reasons, I've never understood the David Fincher or Stanley Kubrick approach of like shooting 50 takes or whatever, so that the actor kind of goes through I think what happens is they go through a process, it breaks them down, and then they kind of find something new. I guess that's the thinking behind it. I don't know. But I believe very much in instinct, and usually your first instinct is your best instinct, not always. But I think that with actors as well, that if you shoot too many takes to scenes, that's when it really starts to lose its life, actually. There's a kind of, usually the first take things are just a bit too rough, and the second take things kind of work. And then in TV, if you don't have it by the 4th take, then you're probably going to be in trouble in terms of time. Like I generally, just from that perspective, I try not to shoot more than 4 takes if I can help it. Yeah.
Right. When you are working on a machine like Westworld, how do you, or can you even, put your own artistic stamp on an episode?
Well, I kind of make that my mission in TV, and primarily because when I produced, like my first TV thing, I did a couple better forgotten TV things early on in my career, just to kind of survive. But before TV sort of reinvented itself and became almost the dominant medium, I did a tiny little TV show on my own with my producing partner, Steve Hoven, called Darknet. And so my first experience was actually kind of coming at it as a producer. I directed the first episode, but then I produced the others and got to work with 5 other directors. And it was really great to see. And I found what I, as a producer, discovered I wanted more than anything from the director was their unique personal vision.
Okay.
I didn't want something generic. I desperately wanted something that was very personal. So that's how I've approached TV, is that I take it, whenever I take a job, I take it very seriously, and I approach it like it's my movie. And I try to put, within the limited time frame, I try to put as much of myself into it as I would one of my own movies, knowing that it's not mine, that at the end of the day, I hand it over to somebody else and it belongs to them, and I'm servicing someone else's vision. But I think whatever success I've had in that world has largely due to the fact that I bring something. Hopefully I'm bringing something to the table and not just kind of towing the line.
Was being an executive producer, did that influence your directing style at all? Because you got to see a project from another key role, from the perspective of another key role?
Well, I was a producer, kind of. Like I could never really produce anything because I don't have that skill set. it was more like I was overseeing the creative side of the producer's job, and you know, helping to sort of track the schedule and so on. But that was great for me. It was like film school. Like I've had a few occasions where I've worked on omnibus movies, or situations where I've been or when I work on a TV show and there's a director leaving as I'm coming in and one coming in as I'm leaving. And it's really great to see other people practice their craft. And I learn a lot by that. Like I think by watching other directors work, and I find it very inspiring, actually, hugely inspiring. So I like that. Like I like being in the company of other filmmakers. I think it's a really healthy thing. It's like, you know, film school, really.
Yeah. Well, that leads me to my next question, which is, you've mentioned Kubrick, you've mentioned Cronenberg. Who are some of the other directors, like modern day contemporaries of yours, whose work you really admire?
I mean, they aren't contemporaries, but you know, David Lynch is very important to me. The Coen brothers are very important to me. Steven Spielberg's very important to me. Alfred Hitchcock's very important. Federico Fellini's important. Akira Kurosawa, and you know, all the usual suspects.
All the visionaries, yeah.
Oddly, I feel somewhat detached from contemporary films, and I think it's partly because I don't have time to watch movies the way I used to, because I'm so busy with work and with family, but also, you know, movies aren't what they were. Like movies that you see in movie theaters are tentpole, tentpole franchise entertainment, and it doesn't excite me in the same way. You know, very corporate kind of franchise entertainment, like Lord of the Rings to me is not corporate. Like that was Peter Jackson's vision, and it's but the movies that are made now, and it's not to denigrate the people who make those films, because I would probably, you know, murder somebody to have the opportunity to do it myself. But it's more that they do feel like film. Oddly, they feel like TV.
Oh, interesting.
Like the Marvel movies feel very TV-like to me, like finely crafted, you know, technically great, like a lot of great stuff going on, but they don't energize me or excite me as a filmmaker. Like there's nothing I've ever seen in a Marvel movie that made me go, oh boy, I want to do that, or I want to use that trick, or that's so inspiring. I don't find them inspiring. I find them impressive, but they don't excite me. So, and I like big movies. Like I like commercial entertainment. I'm not, you know, I like everything really, but yeah, the sort of dominant trends of the last decade or so haven't left me terribly excited.
Yeah, I like that what you said, that they're impressive but not inspiring, because I'm a huge fan of all the Marvel movies, but you're right, they're hugely entertaining for me, but there's never a moment where I think, oh, I'm going to remember that film because it made me feel this, or it made me think that. Not really. But I recently saw Super 8, and you were talking about Super 8, just your childhood, but Super 8.
Yeah.
I mean, that's a film that it will last with you, right? That you'll remember certain moments of just the interaction between those kids, and just how well cast that film is, and just the story itself. I mean, it harkens back, I think, to our childhood, which I think is also why maybe you're saying there's not a lot of contemporaries that you kind of find inspiring in a way, because these are the films we grew up on that made us who we are and made us like what we like now.
It could well be a function of my age, you know.
Yeah.
I want to make one exception. The one Marvel movie that I think that really I was absolutely inspired by and impressed by, and I thought was groundbreaking, was the Spider-Verse, Across the Spider-Verse.
Oh, yeah.
The animated one.
Yeah.
But I mean, I thought it was amazing. I think the other problem I have, I love comic books, and I grew up.
Marvel or DC?
Oh, I was absolutely a Marvel person,
Yeah,
not DC at all. So you would think I'd be the target audience in a way, but for me, the superhero thing it's just problematic because there's something about a comic book which is drawn, which is not a photographic medium, that doesn't fully translate, even with the best special effects in the world, does not fully translate into live action photography perfectly. That's why part of the reason why the Spider-Verse one works so well to me as an animated film was, to me, that felt like a comic book in motion. And did all the things that excite me about associated superhero comic book in motion. Whereas the minute somebody puts on one of those silly costumes, it doesn't matter how much money they spend, how well built they are, they look great when you draw them. They just don't look good to me on a human being. They can't, except maybe Iron Man, but that's like a metal suit. So it's, but any of the tights, even Batman, and I think the Chris Nolan Batman movies are certainly the second one as good as you could get. But anyway, so I digress. But yeah, Super 8, that was certainly the first part of that movie felt very much like my own experience growing up.
Yeah, I bet it did. Well, in talking about comics too, like I was always an X-Men fan, and one of my favorite characters, she wasn't really an X-Men for a long time, not while I was reading the comics, but her name was the Dazzler. Don't know if you're familiar with that character. And
she's like the disco hero.
Yeah, she was an awesome superhero. She turned sound and music into lasers and powers, and she went around on roller skates, and it was just super cool because she was this rock star with mutant powers. And I don't know why I identified with her so deeply, but she was like the Farrah Fawcett to my childhood.
Sure.
Persona. But she made a slight appearance in the most recent X-Men. I can't remember which one it was, but it was the one about young Jean Grey. And you're right, like the translation of that character to the big screen, it just falls so flat. First of all, roller skates would be ridiculous right now. And you can't put her on roller blades because it's not as cool. So it really is hard, as much as I love the Avengers movies. But you're right, there's something about trying to take that graphic novel experience and translate it to the big screen that you just can't quite reclaim the magic of the book itself.
It's hard. Yeah. It's very. But anyway, I mean, but I think really what bothers me more than anything is just about contemporary Hollywood cinemas. It's just the lack of originality. Like whether I've succeeded or not, I don't know, but I've always aspired with all of my films to try to do something new. Not even radically new, but just to push whatever form I was working to someplace that I felt like I hadn't seen before. And that was my aspiration anyway. And that was the spirit with which I thought a lot of people that I admired were working. And I don't feel like there's a place for that in theatrical commercial movies anymore. Like it's not a friendly environment for that kind of filmmaking.
Well, then to that end, and I thank you for your time today, as this podcast is geared towards those filmmakers and artists who are at the beginning of their careers, what would you say to somebody starting out in this environment where, as you just said, like their ingenuity and new ideas is kind of a limited resource to make what does it take to make your mark today? And do you still try to have a stamp, or do you just kind of fit into the fold?
Well, I think, listen, you can look at the situation in different ways, glass half empty or half full way, depending on who you are. I think, especially in the aftermath of what's happening with COVID-19, that people are really going to start absorbing their film experiences at home more and more, and that movie theaters, which breaks my heart because the theatrical experience has always been my preferred way. I don't really watch stuff at home much. I don't like to do it that way, but that's just what it's going to be for a while anyway. And so that's where it's at, and that is an interesting space. And with the advent of all these well-heeled platforms like Netflix and Amazon, and who are fighting a war with each other to dominate that landscape with a lot of money and resources to do it with, there's a lot of opportunity for interesting stuff. Like I just saw Devs. I don't know if you've heard of that. That's an FX TV show by Alex Garland, who did Annihilation. And,
yes, Devs, yeah.
Yeah. And I mean, it's stunning, beautiful, very esoteric, but entertaining, amazing. Like in an 8-part movie, basically. You know, not a soap opera. Like it's a real story, and so that's very exciting. Like I think I don't mean to be disparaging overall for young filmmakers. I think that there's a place for sure for all of us. The challenge is, if you're just starting out now, like how do you get recognized? Because also I think film festivals are going to get a kick in the nuts from COVID-19. I think it's going to be harder to make that little movie that everybody hears about because it played wowed a festival. That's going to be hard in the short term, but probably not in the long term. And so my advice is kind of lame, because I think it's probably what everyone would assume anyway, which is simply the most important thing is to do something that truly expresses what is special about you as a filmmaker. And that can come out in many forms. Like I think when we last talked, I gave a sort of new agey speech about my feelings about being creative in this industry. But I think the most important thing is to be self-reliant. And do not wait for somebody to give you that opportunity to make your feature or your TV show. You really have to make it on your own, or at least maybe you could have a portfolio of projects, and one of them is something that someone else has to pay for. But you need to find a way to make your own thing with your own resources. And where young filmmakers are very fortunate today, as compared with when I started, is that, you know, the device that I am now, with the bridge of the Nostromo behind me, doing this video with you, is entirely capable of making a short film or even a feature. You know, the technology is on your side, and even the means of distribution with YouTube and so on. There's like ways of getting your material out there that never existed before. And then I would even go so far as to say there are different media that you can play with and work with en route to making your movie or your TV show that are super exciting and inspiring, and that could in turn inspire somebody else to give you money to make a movie or a TV show. So you could make a podcast, or, you know, a radio play, or like I'm doing right now, I'm making a graphic novel. Something that you can do on your own that is on a daily basis very gratifying to you, I think is very, very important for your emotional health and survival, not just in this industry, but in life in general.
Yeah.
Like the danger, I will say this now as someone in their 50s who has been doing this for a while, the danger of this industry is, as Dorothy Parker said, the fact that it kills you with encouragement. That there's a carrot that's always dangling in Hollywood or wherever in front of you, and you're chasing that carrot, but the carrot is not the thing. That's truly not what you, when you look back on your career, will find is the thing that was most gratifying to you. What was most gratifying was when you made something, whether it was a little sketch that you posted on Twitter, or, you know, whether it's a photograph you took in the street. It's it's the process of making things and then ideally being able to share them with other people that is really empowering and energizing. And even if that thing isn't a movie, if you can engage with that on a daily basis, it might evolve into a movie, either directly or indirectly. So I think my advice to young filmmakers is just create a lot and be prolific and enjoy that process as much as possible. And then if you can find people who are like-minded to do it with, and that's how we survive. But it's a very it's an extremely brutal, tough industry for everybody. So we have to find ways of, armoring ourselves against all the forces that make it so difficult.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I remember when you said that at the Academy Talks last year, and how important I thought that was for young emerging artists, as well as for anybody really, that you have to be strong you have to find ways to keep your sense of self, your sense of what makes you valuable as a person. You have to keep that armored, because this industry, as you say, as much as it might dangle the carrot, you might never get the carrot. So if you don't get that carrot, then you can't be putting all your eggs in that basket to mix two metaphors that really don't mix. But
eggs and carrots, they go great together.
Perfect omelet.
And if you get the carrot, you may find that you don't want it. Like, let me put it this way, you already have the carrot.
The carrot is inside.
The carrot is in you.
Yeah.
And so, and I know it's easy to say that, especially when what you might be thinking about is like, how am I going to get my next meal, or how am I going to keep my roof over my head? Like, that's number one. You have to be able to clothe yourself, feed yourself, and house yourself. So you got to figure out how to do that. But outside of that, I think that the very new agey lesson I have to impart is find your inner carrot.
I love it. Find your inner carrot. That is amazing. Thank you so much, Vincenzo. I just have one question to ask last as we leave. Your graphic novel that you're writing, is that something you plan on translating to the screen? When and where can we expect to see it? I'm so intrigued.
I don't know. I'm doing it on this device right now, which is an iPad Pro. And the minute the iPad Pro came out, I thought I want to do a comic book. And so I don't know if anyone will want to publish it. I haven't shown it. It's not finished yet. But I think thanks to COVID-19, it will get finished.
Right.
So I have some extra time. So I think it's really going to get done. And maybe somebody will want it. Maybe they won't. Maybe I'll just have to publish it online myself. I almost don't care. The great thing about a comic book, in line with what we were talking about, is that when it's done, it's a finished thing. Mm-hmm. What's frustrating, challenging about movies is that most of your time is spent developing scripts or writing scripts, and scripts are never finished things.
Right.
No one wants to read a script unless it's written by Quentin Tarantino or somebody like that, outside of your circle of friends and a few development executives. So we should write scripts, like we should always be doing that, but it's good to do things that are complete unto themselves. So the comic book company was just that, and empowered by technology. Like I can do everything on the iPad, draw, I can lay it out, do all the dialogue, everything very fast. And yeah, without that, I'm not sure I would have had the gumption, but that's an example of, yeah.
Really looking forward to seeing that when and wherever it comes out. So you'll have to keep us posted, because always looking for something new to read here.
Oh, thanks, Bea. Well, I don't know. I hope it's worthwhile.
I'm sure it will be. Mr. Vincenzo Natali, thanks so much for giving us the time from your spaceship there.
Yes, signing off from the USS Nostromo. I'm going into hypersleep. Take care.
Take care.